Inspire Instructor podcast, where the learning never stops. Welcome, you wonderful people, to the Inspire Instructor Training podcast. Today's episode, we have Stewart Lochrie from Bright Coaching, and we talk about coaching. It's an amazing episode. I think I could talk to Stewart about coaching for hours and hours, but we do condense it down into a 1 hour conversation and discuss our main points around coaching. But I do think if you have a passion for coaching, you want to improve your coaching, then there are lots of resources out there in the industry, and Stewart, obviously, with Bright Coaching, has a diploma in coaching, and our membership. If you watch the videos and follow our Zooms on the membership, you will definitely have a coaching mentality at the end of that. So yeah, lots of ways for you to dig a bit deeper in the industry post listening to this. But for now, go and enjoy the show. So welcome to the podcast, Stewart Lochrie from Bright Coaching. And today we're going to be talking about how to coach, which kind of makes sense to bring on the guy from Bright Coaching. So yeah, welcome, Stewart.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's okay. So yeah, like you said, we're going to be talking about how to coach, and we're going to be kind of trying to get into the nitty gritty of how to do that. But I'm going to start a bit further back. And I've seen quite a few different definitions of coaching. And I'm intrigued to see what yours is. So what's your definition of coaching?
Oh, that's a good one, Phil. Straight off the bat. So the ones you find on the coaching websites can be a bit wordy. I think at a very kind of fundamental level, though, for me, coaching is something that enables people to take control of their own journey. Whether that's towards a final destination goal, or the kind of journey on the way, the kind of the process of performing something. So it's about empowering people to take control of their journey.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. For me, that my definition is similar. The one I sort of kind of hang my hat on is the learning comes from within.
Mhm,
And having that true belief that is the case.
mhm,
I think we talk to everyone about asking questions and the techniques involved in coaching. And something I talk about on our workshop actually is, I think if you just hold that belief, you'll find that your lessons will naturally lean towards coaching. Yes, you can improve your techniques and your questions and the way you go about it, and maybe some processes which we can talk about later. But I think if you just hold that belief of that the learning comes from the learner within the learner, you naturally lead towards wanting to empower them, like you said. So yeah, that's it's yeah, the same sort of thing, just different words, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
definitely. I think when you talk about a belief, sorry to interrupt,
yes, right.
you talk about having that belief. So the phrase I use for that is a coaching approach. Um, and we can differentiate between having a coaching approach and being able to use coaching skills and coaching models. I think you touched on that. I think it's so important for trainers and driving instructors to understand the difference between a coaching approach and coaching skills and techniques. It's something I feel really strongly about, and hopefully we'll be able to, you know, bring that out today a little bit and get a little bit of clarity around it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think these. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I should remember this because it's on my the book club coming up. So, Coaching Skills: A Practical Guide by Christian van Nuremberg.
Yes. Yep.
So we're doing that on the book club. Trying to think when this is coming out, but it'll either be next week or the week after you've just listened to this.
Mhm.
Um, and he sort of kind of talks about that in and describes it as like he said he once heard a manager in an office saying, I'm going to go put my coaching hat on to do these meetings that I've got to do. And it's that sense that um coaching is kind of like a way of being. In a way, it's a belief system, like in a way, and it's just how your environment isn't, like from our perspective, how your environment is in the car. It should be a coaching environment. It's not necessarily something you do. It's something that's just an environment that you embody in that sort of kind of system. So yeah, I think I like that idea of it's like your approach is coaching. I quite like that rather than you do coaching.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you you hear it talked about all the time, don't you? Coaching is just another tool in the box. Which is fine. It's a position, it's an argument that coaching is a tool in the box. But I like to flip it on its head and say that why can we not have instructional techniques as another tool in the box? Do you know, we're all instructors because that's the job title. And we're able to tell people what to do because that's what we've been trained to do. There's no reason why we can't flip that on its head and have the coaching approach first. And actually, I did this with my driving school years ago. When I first got round to writing the Caledonian Masterclass as our own driving instructor training product, and we started off with coaching, and coaching was module one, and still is of Caledonian Masterclass. And yeah, we absolutely will teach you how to tell people what to do. Telling people what to do and giving people instructions and telling people about consequences is a behavioral change technique, and it works. If you look at all the research around behavioral change techniques, telling people what to do works. But these techniques like that are not as effective. Research shows that techniques like that are not as effective as goal setting and getting people to take responsibility for the behavior. So yeah, I would like to flip that concept on its head, and we have coaches who have additional tools in their toolbox where they're able to tell people what to do. Practically, it doesn't make much difference, maybe, but as a mindset, as a way to think about these things, I think that can be very, very useful.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think is I often think that maybe when people talk about coaching as a tool, they don't necessarily understand. Maybe they don't understand it, and they think that quite. I've heard this sort of kind of talked about in the sense that coaching is question techniques and is like Q&A and stuff like that. And I think when you think of coaching in that sense, it probably is a tool in the toolbox. But for me, that's not what coaching is. So I think yeah, there's an element there of maybe a misunderstanding of coaching when we talk about it in that sense. What's really interesting there is I also do the same when I do my training for Cowleys that I implement coaching as pretty much one of the first things we do because I don't see the point in going through how are we going to go and teach roundabouts and all that sort of stuff if we don't have that core coaching understanding before we go and introduce any sort of kind of topics because I want them to be able to have that conversation around roundabouts, junctions, whatever, in a coaching manner. So yeah,
Ah,
it's interesting that we've
yeah.
both fallen upon that.
So 100%. And if you're a trainer listening to this, the values of coaching PDIs are just an incredible value to it. Um, I remember one PDI saying to me once as he was coming up towards his part three. This is like this is 2 years ago. Said, do you know, we've not done, you've not shown me how to teach dual carriageways. Oh, okay, have I not? Okay. Okay, so what do you want to do about that then? So, well, how about I go away and I do some work on dual carriageways and I'll put together a lesson and then we can maybe do that next week. I went, okay, that's fine. Yeah, yeah, of course we can do that. Do you know, just something as simple as that. And he came back the following week and said, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. And just letting people come up with their own path, their own journey. Do you know, he's taking responsibility for it. And it doesn't, the topics, you hear this in other places as well, obviously, that the topics become less important if the approach is right. That's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, there is an element, I think you're right, and that's absolutely how I would go about training a learner. And I think there's an element of for PDIs as they're coming through that it's still important that they understand the topics and have a good knowledge because you can't necessarily have those coaching conversations without that grounding. You're not going to know what they don't know, if that makes sense. If you have that understanding, but you've gone about that in a coaching style in the sense that you've asked that. But and it might have been he said I'll go away and do some research and come back to you. But it might have been actually he might have said, can we have a conversation about it? That's how I want to learn it.
Yeah.
and so that is in essence that is the coaching option, that you've given him the options to sort of kind of decide his own way through this sort of kind of learning journey that he's on. Yeah, so in a yeah, let's go through this question. So why do you think we should coach? What are the benefits?
It's so much more interesting than instructing. It's so much more interesting than delivering briefings for the first 10 minutes of every driving lesson. Um, yeah, the less said about kind of those days, the better, I think. Um, the most important reason, though, is that our job used to be to teach people knowledge and skills. We teach them about junctions. Talk about the highway code and road signs, and you know, from a practical point of view, clutch control and controls and all that kind of stuff. That used to be our job, and I hope that what we're finding now is that that's not enough. Knowledge and skills are not enough because people can have knowledge and skills but still behave in strange ways. Let's say. So young people don't drive too fast round bends because they don't know that it's dangerous. They do know that it's dangerous, but they choose to do it anyway for a reason. So it's not, and I've always kind of thought that the whole safe driving for life was a bit of a rubbish kind of strapline for the DVSA. I get it's historical and all that kind of stuff. But the way I used to think about this is what we need to be doing is teaching safe thinking for life. So how do you teach safe thinking for life? How do you teach thinking? Well, the way you teach thinking is, or one of the ways you can teach thinking is just by getting people to be self-aware. And as soon as you talk about self-awareness with someone and you start to pick up a few models that people can work with, like on a very basic level, reflection. A very basic model of self-assessment is, what did I do well today? What am I pleased with? What am I not pleased with? And what am I going to do next time to try and get better at that? As soon as you do that, you're getting somebody to think about themselves and their own performance. And these are the skills that we need to get into the minds of young drivers. Because to use the analogy of the young driver going around the bend too fast again, this is an example I always use, so apologies if your listeners have heard it before. My argument is always if a young driver goes round a rural road bend too quickly and ends up in a field, that is not the first time he's gone round a bend like that too quickly. My argument would be, because the odds of that are astronomical, my argument would be he goes round that corner or a similar corners too fast on a regular basis and has that moment, as we all do from time to time, but he's not had the ability to reflect on it. He's not had the ability to think about what that whoa moment means. And we can't instruct people on that. We can't instruct people on self-assessment. That if you look at the GDE matrix, and I guess yeah, I think the GDE matrix has to come into a conversation about coaching. But we talk about the GDE matrix all the time, and there are elements on that that can be instructed, obviously. There are some on the higher levels that can be instructed and can be talked about, things like young passengers, fatigue and all that kind of stuff. That can be instructed. But the final column, the third column of the GDE matrix, we cannot instruct at all. We have absolutely no input into that whole third column. So that's depending on which model you're using, that's 4 boxes, potentially 5 or 6 boxes of the GD matrix that we have no influence over at all. All we can do to influence that is teach people how to self-reflect. And you can only do that by that's a coaching technique as far as I'm concerned. And you need to be able to be a coach. I guess if I'm going to stretch that a little bit further, um, you can only teach someone to self-reflect if you're capable of self-reflection and self-awareness yourself. You really have to be able to, what's the phrase? I always get this mixed up. Walk the talk. Yeah, that's it. You've got to be able to walk the talk. You've got to be able to um, have gone through these models yourself at some point in your life, with real life scenarios, to recognize the value and then be able to train other people in these skills. I think that's one reason why coaching is important.
Yes, it's a lovely reason. I There's a couple of things that's interesting in that. The analogy I like to use for this concept of that knowledge and understanding isn't enough is if knowledge and understanding was enough, you would never see a fat doctor, because they know exactly
Yep.
the health benefits and the disadvantages and stuff, but there's not enough. Behavioral change doesn't work because you know.
Correct.
And I think that's the analogy I tend to use, and that's our job then to it's not always easy to change people's behavior or opinions or attitudes, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and do that. The story you were telling me that you were talking about with the person going around the bend too fast, I have a friend, or sort of kind of friend of a friend, who went over a hedge into a field, and the reason was because he had one of those like G's, like where it like measures the G's in his car,
Hmm. Yep.
and he had literally been trying to see how many G's he could get in the car, and he'd done that corner every day on the way to work, and every day he'd just got it, and he went too far. And that's the sort of thing, like you said, that's not a skill issue, it's not a knowledge issue, it's purely an attitude issue, and maybe an understanding of the race and to a certain extent. And it's that conversation that you need to. I couldn't go and tell him, "Don't do that." Like that's bad. Like
Nope.
it would have to be through coaching, and he would have to come to some sort of self-realization that that's not a great idea. How we would get to that conversation, or that, but it's not something I could force feed him. It would have to come from him, and I think this is the point. That's the benefit of that coaching, and I never actually got to have that conversation with him, and he's fine. He's like, I don't know him anymore. He's split up with the person that I knew, so
Yep.
like that sort of kind of thing. But it would be interesting to have that conversation with him, and maybe it was the flipping the car over that was the the catalyst that changed his driving. You never know.
Yeah, I mean,
That's too late.
consequences. Do we maybe give consequences a bit of a hard time at the moment in on the face of recent research? But consequences do work. It's, negative consequences can absolutely have an effect. Yeah, just pleased that the consequences weren't as bad as they could have been, I guess.
That's the
In,
thing, but
in
it's
that,
too late at that point, isn't it? And
yeah,
it's the giving them some sort of realization that without like we I think I'm pretty sure it was your presentation at the internal instructor thing that talked about the fact that the idea of like the scare tactics and stuff just don't necessarily work anymore, or not anymore, they never did. So me telling him you might end up in the over a hedge and crashing and your car sets on fire and that sort of kind of stuff, it like that wouldn't have worked because they would
yeah,
disassociate. That won't happen to me, I'm too skillful. It's not, you just disassociate. So again,
exactly.
it needs to be what's important to them and how they do it. And for me, if I had that conversation, if he's got two kids, and my first question would be, would you drive like that with your kids in the car? And I think I would hope like it would be an interesting conversation if he would say yes, but my hope would he would say no, and then I would go, okay, so what's the difference between the kids being in the car and you not getting home? Like
Yeah,
how's that different? And some sort of kind of realization there, and you'd have that conversation with him, and but it, like I said, it has to come from them and come from within.
yeah, absolutely. Can I just go back a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Just in case I'm accused of taking credit, but it's not due. So the whole shock tactics thing that I was referring to at Yarnfield Park in the presentation is on the back of Elizabeth Box's research that came out. Um, Liz Box and Lisa Dawn's paper, I think it was November 2023. And just for anyone who isn't aware of the research, I think it's kind of important to mention that because I think it validates coaching. Um, they did kind of follow-up work with people who had been shown, traditional shock tactic kind of videos. Kind of usually they're produced by kind of blue light services, and I think the one in this instance was the fire brigade, who get actors and actresses, and they they film them all messing around, and then there's an accident, and there's fake blood, and there's air ambulances and all that kind of stuff. It's all very realistic, really professionally, very well done. Um, but they can still have an impact. And what they found in the research was that females were more likely to be affected by it and what's the word I'm looking at? Influenced into behavioural change, as opposed to younger male drivers who were more likely to have that kind of superiority bias or, optimism bias. That won't happen to me. So yeah, there is still a value, there is still value in that kind of stuff, but we can't rely on it, and we shouldn't kind of trick ourselves. We shouldn't be fooling ourselves that telling people about worst state of play is everybody's going to die. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it anymore. We need more. And the other thing I just wanted to come back on is something you mentioned there. You said you'd be asking them about, would you do that with your kids in the car? So that's a coaching question in my mind, because that is it's asking somebody to it's addressing thoughts and feelings. It's also a behavioral change technique, because you're implying like anticipated regret. You're trying to get to something called anticipated regret, which is a very useful behavioral change technique, as long as it's not kind of overly used. So yeah, that I just wanted to kind of make that point, that nobody's saying that we can't tell people about the consequences. We still kind of have to tick that box. We just can't rely on it in the way that we used to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually a the our local sort of kind of road safety um campaigners or team with fire brigade and stuff that are working with Lisbox to sort of kind of push that. And I've been to the presentation that they deliver, and and I've been to lots of the previous presentations that are all like the scare tactics, and they do still have, and like you said, it's still part of it. So they still have the story from the person who's now in a wheelchair, and tells his story of the night that he got in the car with his friend who was drink driving. And so that is still there at the end. But what the whole of the rest of the presentation is all about making good choices, and they
Mhm.
call them the marshmallow decisions. And we actually we put I put this into our workshop, um, and discussing how it comes from a study with younger children, where they put them in a room with one marshmallow, and if you resist taking the one marshmallow, you get two marshmallows. And it's this concept of withholding your current need for satisfaction to get greater gain after the event. And putting that into a driving context, it's putting your seatbelt on is a marshmallow decision, because it's a decision you're making now for something that might happen in the future. It's telling your friend to take your keys because you're having a drink. It's choosing not to have a drink. It's making sure that your group has a designated driver. Those sort of kind of decisions. It's choosing not to take your friends with you in the car after night because you're four times more likely to be involved in an accident. And it's those sort of kind of decisions that they can make when they're not actually driving, and
Mhm.
like consciously decide. I remember Terry Cook talking about one of his pupils who used to get in the car, and every time they got in the car, said, "This is going to be the most dangerous thing I do today." And I absolutely love that. Just the consciousness to go, I need to be on it today. I need to focus during this journey. And that's a marshmallow decision. She's made
Yeah.
that decision to consciously drive, not just get in the car, drive, and be in a rush or whatever. And I think that concept, that's the concept for me that I think we should be pushing in the cars, is it is this idea of, can we give them the tools and the techniques to go and do that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Because that girl, Terry's pupils, and maybe that was a conversation she had with Terry, but I think she came up with it herself, which is again coaching. But the beauty of it is not everyone is going to do that. Not everyone's going to come up with it, but we can kind of help encourage them to think about these things. Then more and more people will go away with that attitude towards driving.
Yeah, and I think it chimes quite well with those kind of inputs that you've just described about, you know, being able to tell people that it's okay to, give your keys to someone else because you're going to have a drink, and that's empowerment. What we're doing is we're and that was my definition of coaching at the start. You're empowering people, and letting them know that they do have agency in these decisions. Um, that there are obviously, it's very, very easy sitting here and talking about that kind of stuff, and it's very, very easy sitting on a driving lesson. But if we start the ball rolling towards the fact that people have agency to control decisions, these kind of crunch decision-making times that you've just described. What were the other ones you said there? Sorry, the having a drink, giving your keys to someone else. What were some of the other ones you used there?
I don't know. I was off on one.
Oh, okay. Do you know, having friends,
Just having
I
a
think about
designated driver, like maybe that could be
designate,
a rota system.
having your mates in the car and just telling them to shut up. You know, just having being empowered enough that it's actually acceptable to tell your mates to shut up. The honest truth, my car, my rules kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's what I was thinking.
That whole empowerment stuff is what we do through coaching. We empower people to take decisions, and hopefully that comes under the umbrella of safe thinking, because young drivers go away from that experience that driving coaches have given them, and they know that they can take these things on to the rest of their life. So a big argument for me for coaching is the models, the tools, and the techniques that we give our clients: reflection, goal setting, you know, thinking about their own performance, how they can do better. These are not just driving related. These are things that come under safe thinking for life. They will take this into university or college. They'll take it into their job. They'll take it into they can take it into their personal lives. There's just so much value there. Now, the elephant in the room, of course, is the fact that, being an empowered young driver and, knowing that you're capable of making these decisions is always going to come up against peer pressure and, fear of missing out and, wanting to look cool. Because as we know from, again, recent research that I talked about at Yanfield Park, the fear of being judged by your peers is absolutely crippling. And coaching is not a panacea to anything that the human brain does subconsciously, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, it's got to help. It's got to help.
See that peer pressure thing's so interesting. I really recent, and I mean by like 2 weeks ago, had this moment of that same feeling. So I was out on a weekend with my friends, and we were getting a taxi, and we got in the taxi, no one put the seatbelt on.
Mhm.
And so now there's suddenly this like element of like, am I the only one going to put a seatbelt on? Like, and I did, but there was a moment of I'm gonna look like some sort of weird road safety guy just because I'm putting my seatbelt on. Now I weighed that up against the fact that I wear a seatbelt when I'm driving. Why the hell wouldn't I wear a seatbelt when this taxi driver who I do not trust is driving? So, um, so
Yeah,
I put my seatbelt on, and actually, what was quite interesting is so did then everyone else. Everyone followed my lead.
amazing. Yeah, role model.
Without me saying anything, I didn't say anything. I just put my seatbelt on, and then everyone followed. And then the person next to me did, and then they were, "Oh, you put seatbelts on? Okay, on we go." And it shows that power. And I'm like 40 and a driving instructor, and I still had that moment of, "Oh, this is weird. And why am I the only one doing this?" And
Yeah.
it shows that power of that peer pressure.
And somewhere in your mind, it's going, am I going to look like an idiot by putting my seatbelt on? I've got no
Yeah,
idea. I can't remember who I was talking to recently. It'll come back to me later in the podcast, I'm sure. But they were talking about the whole kind of a concept of, when it was a female driving instructor. I can't remember her name. Let's call her Janie. I'm sure her name's not Janie. But she was talking about the fact when she goes into a room or she turns up at something, it's like, all right, okay, here's the driving instructor,
yeah,
and almost being mocked for the fact that you're a road safety expert. Somebody came to me last night. One of my family members came to me last night to ask for my opinion on over 80s driving. And then you've got to go into professional mode because you've been asked for your opinion, but then you give your opinion and nobody agrees with you in the family group chat. It's just like, well, okay, I am a professional. I do know what I'm talking about. That's my opinion. But
yeah.
yeah, you're right. we can manage it. And I know that I'm going to be judged for what I'm saying as being like square or something like that. But we're able to get over that because we're adults. And we have that. Well, actually, I don't care if my mates think I'm daft, or I don't care what my sister-in-law actually thinks. Um, because at the end of the day, this is who I am. Kids don't have that yet, or younger drivers don't have that yet. They've not fully formed their identity. Or if they have, that identity is going to change over time, as we all know. There's no magic pill here, eh? And coaching is not a magic pill. But if we're to go back to the start, if you're a coach, you know this. If you're a coach, you know what the challenges are in working to empower people. You know the challenges that every person is going to come up against. You know where people's pinch points, as I call them, are going to be, and where these crunch decisions are going to be. And as a coach, you can explain these to your clients and help them come up with the strategies, as we've been talking about, to cope.
Yeah, I think that's for me, that last bit you said there is so crucial, and it's something I really try and drive in, that is so important that we come up with solutions,
Mm.
and not just hammer home the this is bad. It's like, okay, but what are we going to do about it? Give them tools and techniques to. So in that scenario, obviously, like we talked about, I didn't overly care about what my friends, but there was a moment. But I've got the knowledge of road safety on my side, and so that helped as a tool, I suppose. But it's also just having, like, what are you like. So the conversation I'll have, and I do this when I teach the honest truth, is we watched the video and I said, okay, what are you going to do if you get in that situation? Give me some ideas that you can come up with that will help you get out of those scenarios. Because when you're in the moment, it's hard. But actually, if you've had that conversation previously and that moment comes up, it's there in the back of your mind, and you go, "Oh, actually, I can say this, and that will get me out of the situation." The one I always love, and I don't know who actually came up with this, but is the idea that when, particularly, I suppose, for it was like a teenage girl thing, because the biggest killer of teenage girls is teenage boys driving cars. And this concept of, you're in the car, your boyfriend's driving like a nutter, and saying slow down, stop, I want to get out, it's not going to work, because he's like just trying to show off. And the solution that they came up with was, tell them you're about to be sick, because no teenage boy wants puke all over their car. They
Yeah.
instantly slow down, stop, get out, like go puke in the bush.
Yeah.
Um, and that's your solution to get out of the situation. Once you're out of the car, you can then have a proper conversation, or just not get back in the car, whatever. But it's that sort of stuff, like find a solution like that they can use in those scenarios post test. And that's what coaching is, like you said. I think we've kind of turned into a road safety podcast, but that's what it comes from, that question of what's the benefit of coaching, and actually that's it's the
Yeah.
fact that we're creating safer drivers on the road.
Yeah, yeah. And if you'll excuse the plug for just a second, that exercise you've just described, that's one of the assignments on Bright Coaching, module 3, is coming up with action plans for, when this happens, what will you do? And we kind of train the instructors how to do that, and they're going to go away and work with their clients and come back and, write about it, tell us what happened, and get some feedback. So yeah, really, really important. Yeah.
So on that note, um, and it kind of links into the practicality of bright coaching. I what How do we coach? So we've talked about the concept of, why we should and what it is, but if we've got someone listening who, hasn't dealt with this, or is trying to coach but maybe is struggling, um, like, yeah, how do we go about coaching in the car on driving lessons?
So, I mean, we could talk for a while about, just learning how to be a coach. I think we can skip over that quite quickly. If you want to improve your coaching skills, read some books on it as a starter, if you're a reader, or get some audiobooks and get some training. Plenty of people in the industry now who you can go to for training on coaching. You guys are doing a brilliant job with your online stuff and your workshops. We've got our qualification. Lee and Mick doing great stuff. The associations as well, Tom Stenson. They are there is training available wherever you look, and a lot of it is really accessible, not very expensive because of Zoom and online stuff. So let's just take that as a read that you've got to get the basics down. got to listen to podcasts like this. Um, the second thing is not to kind of overcomplicate it though. As you said, maybe before we were on air, very, very easy for us to sit here and say, just coach, just be a coach. Very easy. Yeah. Why are you not coaching? Come on, stop being an instructor. We do need some practical things. And this is where we've perhaps not, we've spent a lot of time talking about coaching approach and a coaching mindset. But this is where coaching skills and models come in, I think. And any decent training course that you go on will hopefully give you some kind of model to work with as a starter for 10. So I'll give you probably the easiest ones that I think are to kind of use to get started. And the first one is reflection. For me, you can't really set goals. Some people would say it's goals. I don't think you can set goals unless you've reflected on what's gone previously. Another way of explaining that is we're not going to find a way forward in a goal if we've not checked what the reality is. So we've got to get the R before we get to the O and the W in the GROW model. So if we're reflecting, if you're a driving instructor, get yourself some form of reflective log. I guess what we could do is I'll give you the one that we use, Phil, and you could stick it on the show notes if you want, or you guys have maybe got something similar. And just ask your pupil what to take 5 minutes after the lesson away from the car, very, very important. We can maybe talk about that. To write down what went well. What light bulb moments did they have today? What did they enjoy? What made them smile? What did they finally conquer that they've been struggling with previously? And have a box on your sheet for that. Then, what did they not enjoy today? What was a struggle? What was frustrating? What did they really hate doing? Anything like that. Get some negatives down there. And then the final box is kind of the most important one for the purposes of this, is based on your reflection, what do you want to do today? And the way that we do this at Caledonian and Bright Coaching is we give them 3 choices. So we're empowering them to make their own decision based on their reflection. And from that decision will come a topic for the next session. So, we'll give them the option of repeating the session, same level of difficulty, same level of support. Same topic. The second choice would be same topic, but mixing it up, whether that's making it more challenging on a more busier roundabouts, for example, or reducing the level of support, or it could be making it easier if the last session hasn't gone so well. That would be option 2. And option 3, we call the get out of jail card. Let's go and do something completely different. And this is something that is taken up more often than you would think. If you've had to use the dual controls a couple of times, or the hankies have been engaged in the car because you've had some tears, just give them a break. There's only so many roundabouts people can do before they want a break. Just don't be that guy or woman who, after a disastrous lesson for your learner, says, "Ah, you'll be fine. You'll get it next week. We'll get back on the horse next week, and we'll be great." Don't be that guy. Give them the get out of jail card. So this is coaching. Just a really easy way to get coaching. And we're not even into goal setting or anything like that yet. All we're doing is letting people reflect on what happened and come to a decision on their own about what they want to do next. I don't know if you want to come in at that point and ask any
I
questions.
think it's interesting there because I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head that I think that sometimes it is one of the things that maybe hits a barrier with people when they try coaching, and they start with that question of what would you like to do today, and that's not the starter question. You nailed it on the head with your question, which is based on that. And I always say it's like based on that, and it's based on the conversation you've just had, or based on the reflection you had last lesson. And it should almost quite, like, we talk about coaching quite often, asking questions you don't know the answer to, but actually that is the one question that you don't necessarily know which way they're going to go with their answer, but you've led them nicely into giving them an easier choice to make. Like, what would you like to do today? It's too big, it's too open, there's too much to choose from. What would make sense for us to do today based on our conversation is it's led there, and it's led there by the pupils' thoughts and feelings and reflections. So yeah, I think that's quite a good point to make, that we don't and I think that does get missed out when we talk about the grow model. And I don't know within Bright Coaching, you've got your T grow, and the T is
Mhm.
what you've just kind of described. Um, the and I think that's the issue when we talk about the grow model. People see goals and they start there, and so
Yeah,
that there is an issue there. And I think without that knowledge of how to implement the grow model, use
yeah,
and where to start from, I think you get lost in the grow straight away.
yeah. I think you're right. There's kind of a fundamental if you don't get that have that fundamental understanding at the start about the difference between a topic and a goal, then I see this. The reason we have T-Grow in Bright Coaching is just purely from a selfish point of view, getting so frustrated with sitting in the back of cars with PDIs and seeing a lack of understanding about the difference between a topic and a goal. It's the only reason it's in Bright Coaching. I'm just on a mission to just eradicate that frustration from my PDI training. Um, just something that came to mind when you were talking there. We're talking about how to coach. I think it's a really good opportunity to talk about the difference between how to coach and how to instruct. If you want to know how to instruct at the end of a driving lesson, then do a recap. The way that, back in the day, those of us of a certain age were trained to do. Whereas, okay, so what happened in today's lesson? Oh, today we did that kind of circuit of roundabouts. Yeah, good, good. How did that go? Yeah, well, we did this and we talked about that and we talked about, the fact that I made the wrong decision there. We are actually talking in practical terms about the lesson. So that's instructing and giving direct feedback. So I think we've seen today that your approach still needs a little bit of work. And it's getting that approach to the roundabout right is going to help us with that decision. So that's a recap. Coaching, just let them go and think about it themselves and trust that it's the coaching approach. Trust that they have the the kind of cognitive ability to think about what they did and self-reflect. And even if they don't have that at the start of the relationship, the working relationship, if you keep asking them to do it, they'll figure it out. It's why we need models, isn't it? We have models that they work through and printouts and handouts. Yeah, so that's probably the difference I would make between how to instruct and how to coach at the end of a lesson.
Yeah. Um, so are you suggesting there that, and because I've done this both ways actually, that you're letting them get out of the car and then do their reflections out of the car on their own rather than having that conversation in the car with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are arguments for there are different kinds of reflection, and there are certainly arguments for, all kind of different kinds. But for the job that we do in our specific circumstances, where somebody has just finished a fairly heavy cognitive drive for an hour or 90 minutes or even 2 hours if you're one of the sadists out there, to then ask them to think rationally um, and self-reflect is really, really difficult. That's the first reason. Um, the second reason is, and you'll appreciate this from delivering workshops, we ask people at the end of the workshop, end of your workshop, what people thought about how you did today. They're all just going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to say, Phil, that was the best workshop I've ever attended in my life. It was absolutely amazing. I've taken so much from today. You're brilliant. You're the best trainer in the country.
That's why I asked them.
You're not supposed to give them a handout that says that on it. Um, and what actually happens is they get in their car and they drive home and they get stuck in traffic on the M6 or whatever. And then they start thinking, so what did I actually think about that today? What do I remember? Because that was a 6.5 hour workshop plus lunch. My brain is absolutely fried. What can I remember? What was useful? Oh yeah, that bit they did before lunch about contracting. Yeah, that was really useful. I need to think a bit more about that. After lunch, I was absolutely shattered. I was like really tired after lunch. I actually can't remember what Phil was talking about after lunch. So I can't remember that at all. Was that worth the money? Sure, yeah, well, it's a lot of money. I've had to take the day off work. I've had to travel. Would I do it again? I'm not really sure. These are the personal reflections that you're not going to get by putting somebody on the spot at the end of the workshop. So those are the two reasons that I think the value is in reflecting away from the instructor, and getting them to do it on their own.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the only thing I put on that with learners particularly is in the early lessons, I might do it with them in the car in
Mhm.
a way to you're training because, like you said, we're teaching them to self-reflect, and
Mhm.
some pupils will get in the car. They've done this in other walks of life, school or work or whatever, and they'll get in the car and they'll just be able to do it, and that's fine. Send them off if they're those sort of people that are going to give you like 10 paragraphs of their self-reflection, then fantastic. But some people need help and they need support going through that. So it's sometimes worth, I think, going through that with them, and then also sending them away to reflect more on their own. But just kind of helping them kind of work out what do they need to do for this self-reflection, what are we asking, what are we hoping for them to come out of that. So in a way, you do need to train them a little bit to do that,
Mhm.
and you'll have some pupils that maybe just don't buy into the process and aren't going to do it at home, and that can be challenging. You can have conversations about like, the benefits of that and what are they trying to achieve, and trying to, I suppose, encourage them to buy into the process a little bit more. But I think with those pupils, I might just go, okay, that's fine, but it's not as beneficial, but we'll do it in the car because
Yeah,
I think it's beneficial that we do it somewhere. So
yeah,
it works on different pupils, doesn't it?
yeah. Listen, you can't force these things. At the end of the day, we have one instructor just now who's really struggling with a client who just doesn't want to think about her own performance in the car. She doesn't want to have a conversation about it. Interestingly, she's a teacher. Um, she's almost like, I don't want to be coached, just tell me what to do. But on things like reflection and getting people to go away, sometimes what we come up against is the fact that, my mates are learning to drive and they're not been asked to do any of this. So why do I need to do it? And what you have there is a norm. And like, what is the norm of learning to drive? Well, the norm of learning to drive is just that I don't get asked to do this. And I've had this with PDIs as well. So one of the things that I sometimes do with PDIs, and I've encouraged instructors to do it with the learners, is just show them some reflective logs that their peers have done. So our PDI reflective logs are online. And if I've got a tablet in the car at the end of the session, I can show. So that on day one with a PDI, and you're going to have access to this piece of software. This is where you write down your reflections. This is what it looks like when somebody does it. So then it's the norm. You've redefined the norm, or not even redefined. You are defining the norm that everyone does this. Everyone does this. If your pals don't do it, well, they're mad because everyone else does it.
It's
Do you know
almost like
this?
reverse peer pressure, isn't it? In
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sense.
absolutely, yeah. Because
I remember hearing a story about how I can't remember what they were selling at houses. Maybe like, let's say for example solar panels, for example, and they tested out different selling techniques, and it was like this is cheaper, this is better for the environment, all of these kind of things. And the one that worked the most was everyone else is doing it.
yeah,
That all your neighbors are getting this,
yeah,
and that was then suddenly like, oh well, if it was almost like keeping up with the Joneses and stuff. It was like that sort of
yeah.
kind of
Listen,
it,
the absolute masters of behavioral change are the sales and marketing people.
yeah,
No doubt about it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of cover just because we've mentioned grow a few times, and we haven't actually said what it is. So got grow is goals, reality, options, way forward. I think from a time point of view, I don't think we will go too much into that because, like you said at the start, if you want to learn more about coaching, you want to learn more about grow, go on our workshop, go on your course, or like there's videos out there and stuff as well. So like this is that kind of element of like if you're interested in coaching, go find a way that you'd like to learn and dig into it a little bit more. And you've talked about reflection, so we kind of got the start of the lesson, and although grow, I think, runs all the way through the lesson, and so does reflections. But do you, so something that we talk about it with ours is experimental learning. as the sort of kind of model for the bit at the middle of the lesson, the repeating of the middle of the lesson. Is that something you guys do on your workshops?
Um, it's not something we mention. Do you know, I know the model. Kolb, isn't it? I know the
Yeah.
model. Not something that I probably have as I can see the value of it. Definitely, I've not done a lot of experimenting with it in my training, to be honest. I think I probably have as like the central core of my training, my ideas around training, is targeting thoughts and feelings and just constantly trying to get feedback from the other person. So, Joe, indirectly, yeah, experiential learning, you know, what happened there? How do you feel about that? What do you think? Giving people opportunities to solve problems for themselves. Um, I think the challenge with getting the majority of driving instructors to do that is that questions can quite often focus too strongly on knowledge and skills as opposed to, you know, thoughts and feelings and behavior. And you know, I trained with tri coaching, so this is very much the kind of core of my ethos, if you like. But yeah, I think it's that this is where the coaching approach comes in really strongly, I think. You know, trusting the fact that people will be able to problem solve for themselves, and trusting that they have the capability to learn in that way that you've just mentioned is one of the ways. Takes a lot of patience and a lot of belief in yourself. Sorry, a lot of belief in the people you're training, and the skill to actually shut up. So these things call all kind of interact. It's kind of like that's where the magic happens, I think, the kind of center of the lesson, whether it's going well or whether it's not going well. Yeah,
It sounds like you do experimental coaching learning,
we just
but
don't
you
call it
don't
that.
call it
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually sometimes that can be a benefit, like not putting a label on it and just having it. It's again what we talked about, like coaching just being the way you do it rather than having this course. It's something that I like to teach my PDIs because I think it gives them a structure to go through those conversations, and to it kind of for me it brings away from this idea of this fault based conversations and moves us towards that we've just done a bit of experimenting, and
yeah,
I love to call it experimenting, and I talk to my learners about this where I give them this idea, and I think I talked about this on the podcast with Lee, where um we're like scientists, and that you're imagining that this is the first time anyone's ever driven a car, and we're going off to find out how it works. And
excellent. Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
scientists make mistakes all the time. And
yeah.
they want to because they learn from them and they go, well, that's not the way to do it. And that's how they come to a fact of science because they've discounted everything else. And I like giving pupils that freedom to make mistakes by talking about learning. Like we're experimenting. This is the first time anyone's ever done it. Let's go find out how it works. And that's for me the core of it. Again, it comes back to that. Yes, we can have the model. Yes, you can go through the processes. And I think when you first get started, I think it's important to have steps because it isn't easy to do all of this naturally. So it's nice to have the steps. But underneath that, and it goes right back to what we started at the start. I think underneath that, you need that true belief that it's going to come from the learner. If you don't have that, you're forcing it, and it'll always come back to instructing. You'll always come back to jumping in and giving them the answer. You'll always come back into not giving them enough time to think, because if you don't genuinely believe they can work it out, of course you're going to jump in and tell them. Of course, your questions are going to lead down that way and stuff as well. So it's yeah,
I think that's brilliant, Phil. I'm absolutely going to steal that. And I'm not going to credit you
that's
either.
fair enough.
When I do steal it. No, it's really interesting. I'll go and read up about it. I've lost my train of thought. Something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, I remember now. One thing we didn't mention about kind of a coaching approach, and again, we probably don't have time to go into it. But getting people on side with how you are going to train is that whole contracting thing. Again, something we're very strong on in Bright Coaching. You're almost getting permission from your client that they're okay with the fact that you're going to put a lot of the responsibility onto them, that they are going to be expected to, you know, self-reflect and self-analyze their own performance. which is a big part of kind of experiential learning as well, isn't it? Is the is experiential learning, is it Kolb? Is
It's
that the
called, yeah.
model? Yeah, concrete
Yeah.
experience. Is that
And then
that's
you've kind of got Gibbs's reflective cycle, which is
yeah,
really similar,
yeah,
and goes for it. For me, I lean towards the experimental learning one. It partly
yeah.
because there's less steps. There's only
There is
four
a
steps.
there is a simpler model of reflection that we've kind of used, which is ERA,
Okay.
which is just the experience that maybe fits a little bit with the way that you're approaching it.
Yeah.
The experience, then the reality of what happened, and then the action, what we're going to do as a result. So
Basically,
it's
yeah.
because Gibbs has got about 6 steps, I think, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
as long as too many.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, that is basically experimental learning. I think the only thing that's in the so experimental learning is you go and do the practice, then
Yeah,
you have your analysis,
yeah,
and then conclusions of that analysis, and then you create a plan, and then you go
yeah,
put it back in.
yeah.
So it's basically the same thing, yeah.
No, it's good, and I think the key message there, we maybe got a little bit bogged down there. Sorry for your listeners. It's the key thing that you said was as a way to kind of deal with fault analysis. It just keeps it more on the client's agenda, and they've still got responsibility for solving the problem, and hopefully improving on that side of things.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I want to like, are there any key things that you think instructors hit a wall with when it comes to trying out coaching, and like, what are their biggest challenges, and also maybe like what they could do to sort of improve those?
Yeah, so two really important things. I think the first one we'll just talk about very quickly. Instructors need to shut up. They need to stop talking. It's the sixth key coaching skill is just learning when to stop talking and be comfortable with silence. Do you know? Um, I give the example that if I'm in a room with you and you ask me a question, I'm not going to answer you straight away because I'm not that kind of thinker. And even we've done enough Zoom calls now, Phil, and you've seen me on enough podcasts that I look out my window. Got a lovely window here. If you ask me a question, I will look out my window and I will think about what I'm going to say next. I'll run it through my head before I actually come back and answer you. And if you're the kind of person doesn't operate at that speed, then you're going to take that silence as potentially you're going to take that silence as this person doesn't know the answer to that question. And I've had 4 coffees today. I need to speed things up here so that we can get the wheels moving. So I'll just give them the answer. So as soon as you do that, you're not holding that coaching approach. You're not holding that coaching mindset. You are if you've made an agreement that you're going to coach someone, then you're breaking your agreement. You've got to leave them space to think about the question that you've asked and come up with their own solution. So that would be the first thing. The second one, probably more relevant or more common, is around feedback. So I'm dealing a lot with kind of feedback things just now with some of the PDIs that we have. I'm a fan of scaling and eliciting feedback when it's done properly. In the spirit of giving credit where it's due, I use the model that I learned through Try Coaching with which is SEDS. As far as I know, they came up with that model of SEDS. You know, scale, evidence, development, support, success is the one that I still use to this day. Um, but the problem occurs when people misunderstand what a coaching approach is, and they think that they have to elicit feedback and that the pupil has to come up with their own answers and their own solutions to problems. So we've been talking a lot about the pupil has the ability, the capability, the skills to solve on problems and become empowered for their journey. But sometimes they might just be having a bit of a rubbish day. They might just not have had their coffee this morning, or they're distracted with something else. It is absolutely fine to give direct feedback. It's how you do it that matters. So, very quick example, you've gone through a scaling model with your clients, and they're maybe not picking up on a slight area of weakness that you can see is absolutely glaring. They've not recognized that they're still in third gear on approach to a roundabout, for example. At some point, we are allowed to stop being coaches and just be mentors or instructors. Instructing and mentoring is the same thing in my book. Okay. We are allowed to say, listen, you mind if I just give you a bit of feedback on something here? Get permission. Really important, because then we're still within that coaching mindset. Get permission if you want to give direct feedback. I noticed that when we're approaching these roundabouts, that you're doing your mirror signal position routine really, really well, but you're forgetting to bring it down to third gear. And then all you'll get is boom, light bulb moment from your client. Thank you so much. That's so much better than just keeping asking me questions as you've been doing for the past, 2 weeks. You could just have told me that. So direct feedback, definitely a place for it. We went through a phase in our industry of saying that we weren't allowed to tell people what to do. We weren't allowed to tell people what was happening. It's not true. It's not true. It's how we do it. Don't use the praise sandwich. Please try and avoid the praise sandwich. Um, it's a very yeah, I'm not even going to talk about it. Just don't use the praise sandwich. If you don't know what the praise sandwich is, try not to be the person who says, so I think you did this really well today. We need to work on slowing down an approach to roundabouts. But I can see that you're looking really nicely. I can see that you're planning really far ahead, because people just don't your praise doesn't have the effect that it should have, and your criticism doesn't have the effect that it should have. Everything just gets diluted in a praise sandwich. So
It's
either
it's
elicit or give.
it's also you remember the negative, don't you?
Yes.
I remember actually doing that on the try coaching course. Actually, there was, I think we had to draw a picture,
Okay.
and then the person on the other end would give you positive and then a negative and then a positive about your picture. I'm not great at drawing, so they struggled with two positives and really sort of kind of hammered home the negatives. Um, and but it's the thing is it's the thing you remember, isn't it? And you're right. So yeah, definitely honest feedback is the key.
Yes.
And I think I told this story on Emma's podcast about how this scenario about giving feedback, and I was sat in the back of a lesson, and to be fair, to credit to the instructor, it was very early on in his training, and he was doing what I taught him to do, which is ask questions and get the pupil to self-reflect. He was just really hammering home this self-reflection sort of kind of thing. But the pupil was just clearly not aware of what the issue was. And so that was where it was like I came in and I said, like, I just want to raise your awareness of this issue. And then we go back to coaching. And I think that's the thing is you raise the situation. And this isn't just driving. This is like coaching like in all scenarios. If you're coaching someone from personal reasons, some people don't know like what's wrong. Like
Yes.
they're not aware of their own, they can't see the sort of kind of wood for the trees sort of kind of thing. So sometimes it's your job to raise their awareness of something and say, oh, I've just noticed this in a non-judgmental manner. And then we go back to asking questions and go, what are your thoughts on that? And leading
Absolutely.
it in. And I think that's a really sort of crucial one. I do want to come back to one thing you said. So you mentioned, I think it was about not being silent, which I think we all go on about, as like being silent and shutting up. Um, and you mentioned it as part of number six of the skills, the coaching skills. And
Mhm.
before I get you to list the other ones,
Oh no.
because I think people should know, the
I have to
I
write them down. I'm going to have to write them down, Phil.
I'll
Hang
give
on.
you time. I'll tell my story first. So actually, I heard this solution to that because I think this is something instructors do struggle with when you're used to jumping in. And it was actually Lee Sperry was on a doing a presentation, and he said it was something that Bob Morton had told him to do when he first started doing this, was have a bottle of water in your hand, and every time you ask a question, have a drink of water because you can't talk while you're drinking. You might need a wee by the end of the lesson, but it's a really good way to just get yourself into the habit of being quiet for a second and not ask it, because it's not just shutting up enough to hear the answer. I quite often find that you ask a really good question and then you follow it up with a clarification question instead of just letting that question sit and giving them time. I remember doing a role play session not too long ago where the instructor asked me a really good question and I was in role and I genuinely was sat there thinking, oh, how am I going to answer this question? And in the time I was thinking, he then asked me another question, and I was like, "Oh, okay. How am I going to answer this question now?" And in the time I was thinking of that, he went to, and I was like, "Please shut up,"
Yes. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like give me time to and I felt it as like I was in role, but I felt it. I felt that like I was about to say something, and you've interrupted me, and you do feel like disempowered, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and not sort of valued and listened to. So yeah, it's find a technique basically to help yourself shut up, because I think that's one of the most crucial skills
Yeah, just to develop that one step further, the way I kind of explain this to PDIs is if you ask me a question and you don't give me time to think about it because I'm looking out the window, and then you ask me another one, then your learner is potentially going to have the response that so first of all, oh my God, I don't know the answer to that. Let me think about that for a second. Oh my God, he's asked me another question because he thinks that question was too difficult for me. Now he thinks I'm stupid. Oh my God, now he's asked me another question. So he thinks I'm really stupid. He's really trying to dumb down the questions here because that's what instructors do. We ask a question and then we simplify it. And that has a message. That's sending a message to the person you're asking the question to, whether we mean to or not. It may come from a genuinely empathetic place. We're trying to help people, but that message can very often get lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I'm gonna get you to list the coaching
Oh,
skills
yeah.
now.
I tell you what, before I do this, before I get this wrong, okay? Um, I've picked up try coaching. I'm going to give them a hit now. I'm not sure the key coaching skills are all they're cracked up to be, and I'm willing to put myself out there and say this. And we can direct people to a video, a TED talk that changed my mind on this. The whole idea of the key coaching skills, or one of the whole ideas of the key coaching skills, is that you employ the key coaching skills to show that you're listening to people. So, we make eye contact and we nod and we can match body language and we can repeat things back and we can summarize things. Have I got them all yet? I think that's most of them. But there is a counter argument to that that says if we have a coaching approach and we are genuinely curious and interested in what that person has to say, then we don't have to do any of that stuff because it'll happen automatically. It's almost like the key coaching skills are us trying to scam people that, I can't really be bothered today. I'm having a bit of a rough day. But here we go. I'll put my coaching hat on and I'll turn around and I'll nod and I'll make eye contact and I'll paraphrase. So we shouldn't have to do that. If we're coaches, we are genuinely curious and our eyes are open. So body language, nodding, intuition, paraphrasing and repeating back. What have I missed, Phil?
Active listening.
Oh yeah, listening, of course. Yeah, we've just been talking about it. God, yeah, okay, yeah,
I
listening.
think probably questioning techniques is in there as well. Did you
Okay,
say intuition?
I said intuition. Yeah,
Yeah.
that one's always kind of in the middle there. I find it difficult to talk about intuition um, as something to train. I think that's a weakness that I have in my PDI training. I think about it in my own head about it as emotional intelligence, and I think if you can train PDIs to understand a little bit about emotional intelligence, that's where intuition comes from.
Yeah.
That ability to read a room. So again, a bit like experiential learning, I do it, but not from not from the same tin as a lot of people will
I
do.
think I describe intuition as my spidey senses,
Okay,
um,
yeah, yeah,
and just that feeling that something isn't quite clicking with the pupil, or something isn't quite right, or because it's a combination of body language, tone, length of time, knowing the pupil, all of these. There's so much going on there, which why is possibly you're sort of kind of thinking this is hard to describe, because in the same way it's hard to describe judgment and stuff, because
yeah,
it's a combination of lots of different factors. So I think I describe it as it's that spidey sense. Something is just twitches in your mind and goes, okay, this I need, and then you just got to kind of, that's where active listening comes in. You got to kind of go, what is it? What is it I need to focus on here?
yeah.
And then that's when you dig in a bit more and ask a different question, or whatever the
Yeah,
scenario needs.
definitely. And hearing you talk about it there, it kind of reminds me of just another really important part of this, which is about the focus always being on the client, client-centered, to borrow a phrase, and being on their agenda. And if you are fully on the other person's agenda, then you're more likely to be receptive to these things, like body language or um, you know, listening between the lines, I guess, tones of voice, maybe picking up on somebody saying something which they don't quite mean, or holding something back for some reason. But you can't do that if you're thinking about what your next question is going to be, because you'll miss so much. So yeah, listening and watching and intuition all interlink really strongly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that kind of rounds us up quite nicely in what you were saying there is being on their agenda, and a lot of what you kind of said there, it all comes from this idea that we started with, which is that you have this belief in the pupil, and coaching is a way of being or an approach, because if that is the way the lesson is and your environment is in the car, all of that's going to happen. And I think probably the issue with maybe someone who isn't coaching at the moment or is trying out coaching, um, it's like any skill. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to suddenly get all of this right. And it's just about kind of persevering with it, going on these courses, listening to these podcasts, and carry on sort of just integrating yourself in that world. And the more you do that, the more you will find that, yeah, it just becomes the way you have your conversations.
Yeah.
And that's how then it'll be quite natural. You'll find that it'll probably seep into the rest of your life as well.
Yeah,
And
absolutely, absolutely. Joe, we're all on a journey here. We're all on a journey. I have not reached the level of, ability in my coaching skills that I want to. I still have a long way to go to get to where I want to be. But there's no minimum standard for coaching, I don't think. You are where you are. You have the knowledge that you have, and if you're just sending people away to reflect at the end of a lesson with a piece of paper and asking them to pick a topic the next time, then you're coaching. Well done. You're well done. You're doing more, I would argue, than 80% of the driving instructors out there who have a set syllabus and are telling their pupils that. So we're not finished with Crossroads yet. So we're going to do that again next week. Or that's you. You've done enough. You've got the 5 stars now on Crossroads, because that's what it says in all the apps, isn't it? In the booklets and the DVSA. Oh, don't get me on that. What's that called? The DVSA guide.
ready to pass?
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, it's actually it's the logbook, the driver's logbook.
Oh yeah.
Um, so if you're sending people away and empowering them to make a decision on something to do with their lesson or how they are going to learn, you're coaching. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And once you get comfortable with that and you're doing it every day, then start to learn about goal setting, start to learn about eliciting feedback, and just pick one skill at a time, but all with the approach as the kind of umbrella, if you like.
Yeah, or get a coach.
Or get a coach. Yeah, yeah. Honestly, yeah, life changing for me. Honestly, life changing. Bright coaching would not exist if I hadn't done my qualification in coaching and been given a coach as part of my coursework. Yeah, just so important. Get a coach.
So I think we'll wrap it up there. And if you want to just spend a moment to tell everyone where they can find you and what they can find you for.
Yeah, so you can find Bright Coaching at brightcoaching.net. We are in the process of just finalising the next cohorts and when and where they're going to be. You can find me at the ADINGC. I'm the Deputy Chair of the ADINGC. And yeah, I think those are the two main places to find me at the moment if you're interested in coaching or development in any way.
So yeah, thank you very much for coming on. And yeah, anybody listening, absolutely check out everything Stuart's got, because you're doing some amazing stuff over at Bright Coaching. So
thanks a lot, Phil. Thanks for having me on. Always really enjoy chatting to you about this kind of stuff. Could probably do like a 4-hour podcast, but yeah, really good. Thanks again.
Cheers, thank you. Inspire Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops.